Evening to everyone out there at PAX Aus 2021. Thank you for joining us for another virtual panel. This panel's topic is Tabletop in the Plague Years, the Pivot to Digital. And our summary is, with in-person gaming few and far between for perhaps the foreseeable future, tabletop designers are swiftly pivoting to digital presentation or risking being left behind. The upside is that this allows us unparalleled access to international events, publishers and clients. So what has the experience been like for companies and designers making this pivot, and what can aspiring designers learn from their experience? And joining us today, we have Mark, who is the community manager for Tabletopia, the board game software, which is an online platform with over 1,800 official board games available to play on your web browser or mobile. He is also the co-founder of Ludo Cherry, a line of board game inspired clothing. We also have Sally Brown, also aka SallyScribe, who has taken her games to Gen Con and Protostspiel, first in person and then online. Her three main games are Shake Stirred, But First Coffee, and Treasure Mania, the last of which won an outstanding prototype award at PacificCon Expo in 2018. Callan Davis is the Director of Operations at Half Monster Games, who produced some award-winning games, including Terrible Candidates, Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, and their new Xeno Hunters, which did very well on Kickstarter earlier this year and is coming to backers very soon. And someone's ringing my doorbell, so that'll be cleared up in a moment. And finally, Cassie Simpson is the owner of Katzenspiel Solutions, a company that has recently produced the game Klepto Kittens, and she also works doing digital implementations of board games into online platforms. So we have a lot of experience in this area. So the first question that I wrote down was, how important is pivoting to digital on a scale of 1 to 10? Is it something that every game designer has to be doing as fast as possible? I see you nodding, Mark.
I mean, I'm a little biased here, so I'll submit a 10 for this one. No, how important is the pivot to digital? I think it depends on who you are, right? So are you a designer, a publisher, a consumer? And I think if you're sort of in the pitching stage, if you've got a game design and you're wanting to get it seen by publishers, it's definitely an important part of selling your product now, especially when there's limited contact to be had between people. So I think digital is definitely a good thing, especially, and also if you're a consumer, it's a really good chance to try games. It gives you a chance to play the games before they actually get into your hands, or play something to maybe decide if you want to play it or not, if you want to purchase it or not. I definitely think the digital versions of games give you a lot of scope to test out a game before you physically get it in your hands, which is what ultimately a lot of gamers do end up wanting.
Yeah. So just going over to Callan then, you mentioned, Mark mentioned reaching customers. Callan, how much promotion do you do with your board games on digital? How much do you do outreach to customers?
Yeah, so when COVID hit, it was actually, it was probably what saved our company. Essentially, we did a pivot to digital. We moved everything over to Tabletopia. Cassie was a great help with setting all that up. And we ran for about 2 months during the full lockdown online game days. And it just kept our company running, kept our games in the sphere of people's eye. I think it's a tool that's essential for every game design or tabletop game design company. Now, it helps us with prototyping if we have to prototype during lockdown. It helps us in terms of if we have clients and we want to show them a game before the prototype, the physical prototype is necessarily ready, or if they're in another country and shipping is quite difficult at the moment. And then, in terms of a final product, it's really, really good to be able to put a final product up there, that people can try before you buy, which is kind of like a really important thing, the tagline that we've been using, which I think is quite useful. And I'm sure Sally can talk about how it's helped get some of her games out to more audiences than would have been available, post-COVID when everyone sort of was trying to stay at home.
Yes, Sally, you've done some pitching and also playtesting with your games?
So, this year I was planning my next trip to America for realsies, planning to go to Gen Con as I've been in 2018. Then obviously all that got canned. And I thought, oh well, plan B. And then I was very lucky to know Cassie, and she suggested putting my games online. So she did. She actually took all the files I had and converted them to Tabletop Simulator games. And when I first saw them, I was like, oh my god, this is magic! But what that allowed me to do was sign up for Gen Con, sign up for Cassie Online and PAX Collab. So instead of going out in person, I was going out to these places virtually, and then meeting people from all over the world virtually again, like we all are here, and just making those connections and getting great feedback, but also having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's certainly a huge issue for Australia is, of course, our distance from things. Do we think this is just going to be, just the absolute essential for all Australian designers, or indeed across the world going forward, to just, post when COVID has gone away, will we still desperately want to be on digital to get this access?
Yeah, I think a big question during GDC last year was talking about accessibility for smaller regions. Mm-hmm. And, this makes it like, if you think about, for example, Australia is a good example, but there are other countries for sure, especially Southeast Asia and rural European areas where game designers who are quite skilled in producing good stuff can't physically get their product to the US market. So it's a really good opportunity for them to reach that as well.
I agree. I think a lot of the accessibility of digital can really push people in those markets forward. We've actually got games on Tabletopia from Nigerian game designers who would never get those prototypes out anywhere else. And I think it's a really cool way of giving publishers more than just the pitch PDF, but actually giving them a space to play with the artwork, play with the cards, and really see how the game feels, which I think is an important element that you miss from just reading about a game.
Yeah, and being able to get them into the ball is really valuable as well.
Yeah.
So, Cassie, you've been doing some digital implementation. Can you tell us a little bit about that project? Like, say that process. I mean, if I've got a game, obviously some things seem easy, but what if you're doing things that require lots of complicated pieces? Is this something that you should definitely get a third party to help you with?
Yes. So obviously, I started learning Tape Simulator. Sorry, Mark. At the start of the pandemic, and one of my first projects was Sally's game Treasure Mania, and that was 18 hours because I was learning, and oh my gosh, but it's still one of my favorites because it's just so beautiful on the screen. But yeah, just like, a lot of people don't have the time to fiddle around and learn and things like that, and everybody has a different skill set too. So just outsourcing that to somebody who's just going to focus on getting that done is a huge time saver.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Ellie would agree, since she's started doing her own now too, and probably now has some idea of how much work it can be.
Oh, absolutely. So that was the next part of the story was after Cassie put my games online initially, she gave me a little lesson on the basics of how to do it. And then I'm like, okay. And I started to learn it myself. And it was a steep learning curve because I didn't know I knew Photoshop. I'd already taught myself that. The only thing I knew was I knew how to learn. I didn't know Discord. I didn't know what Steam was. These programs work together, how? And basically, you play around the program. So I use Tabletop Simulator for whatever you might use. you're opening drawers, you're clicking things. What does this do? There's tutorials online which the developers themselves have, where you can ask Google for help, and then you're reading Reddit answers, and sometimes troubleshooting is really frustrating, but sometimes funny. So, for example, on Tabletop Simulator, I was scanning in my files, like creating my little piece, then it pops up, and it would disappear, and it really frustrated me because it was like, where is it going? Where is it going? And I looked online, I found no answers, and all the little bits had fallen through the table, and they were underneath the virtual table, like a cat had collected them all there. And, I thought, maybe I should write a blog post so if someone else has that experience, they'll know what to do. But, so by the end of it, that was most of this year, I was teaching myself that, but I felt like a pro. And seeing yourself get better and better, you get this dopamine drip of kind of like, it's coming along. And then you've got a new skill under your belt.
Yeah, fantastic. You're just using Tabletop Simulator, though? Should people try to have more than one platform?
I think so. No, I haven't tried Tabletopia just because I guess I had something, so I didn't feel the need, but people might feel comfortable in different spaces. And also, if you have a game, you want to get it in every shop, you know what I mean? So the more the merrier. Just because I haven't approached that yet doesn't mean it's not great too.
I've always been an advocate for game designers and publishers to get their game on Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator, just to get it out there and get it seen, because like you said, a lot of people are more comfortable with one system over another. So I think if you're in the business of marketing your game, you'd be silly not to get it in as many places as possible.
As someone who obviously implements onto both platforms, and also we had Tabletop Playground, but that sort of fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
I personally find Tabletop Simulator is easier as a creator to use because I feel like it's got a lot more quality of life things that are easier as a creator, but it has a steeper learning curve and price entry as a user, so as a player. And then Tabletopia is free for everyone to play with, but has a cost to the creator, and is a little bit more finicky with some of the things like mapping and stuff like that. So it's, I definitely find it's good to use it on both if you can. There's definitely some of my games, like Klepto Kittens, I've done on Tabletop Simulator, but I don't know that I would do on Tabletopia because I'm using the random shuffle layout, and I'm not sure if there's something as easy to do on Tabletopia for it.
Yeah, of course. I think I agree with that sentiment for sure, especially when it comes to prototyping and developing your game. I think a lot, just because it's been around for a bit longer and people have developed mods and tools, and you've got, programs like Nandeck that help you just spit out new cards in an instant. There's definitely a lot more flexibility for changing your game on the fly with Tabletop Simulator. But as you said, also with Tabletopia, I think because it's free and because anyone can access it from their browser, it's a lot more accessible for consumers. So I think there's definitely a balance in when you want to use each platform, and I think both have their merits at different stages of the process.
And I imagine going up... go Callan. Yep.
I just wanted to jump in with regards to the actual initial question in terms of, is it worth getting an expert? I think absolutely it is worth getting an expert if your intent is to get your game up quickly and try it out. If you want to put the time into learning how to do it so that you can, in the long term, do it again and again, that's important. But you've got to balance that opportunity cost, whether it's worth you spending time trying to figure out how to upload your game to a digital platform versus being able to improve it. So there's benefits and detriments to both, but in my experience, and we've gone with Cassie for pretty much everything we've had uploaded, and it's been a game changer for us, and it's certainly helped us not have to spend a lot of time trying to learn those skills.
So in that case, you're doing a dramatic amount of play testing on these things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do in-house play testing with our physical prototypes. Then we have a Discord group that we do online play testing. We do regular play testing games on Thursdays in the US as well as an Australian time zone. So what it essentially allows us to do is we can put a game up early, and because there's the digital, we can iterate quickly on the design, and then we can actually test how well it works very early on with a large audience. And one thing that actually came out interestingly with the design of Xenohunters was because we had to make it digital first off, because it was designed during COVID. So all of our playtesting was done using Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia. What it meant was that we actually changed the design of the game to be really visually explicit. So the letters were big, the colors were really bright, the whole thing was designed, and we had all of the rules on each of the cards so that there wasn't a rule book that you had to page through as a PDF. It's much harder to do, and it ended up becoming quite a good sort of design method for that game, because it meant that a lot of players, when we got to the physical prototype stage, had those benefits as well.
That's fascinating. Do you think that's going to affect design as a whole? Actually, Cassie, did you have a point on that?
It was more just an anecdote. Like, I just remember the first time Callan, Jack, and I played Xenohunters right at the start of the pandemic, and just I was in such a bad mental space then, and it was just like, wow, and it was like such a fond memory.
Yeah, it was huge. And I remember you were a whiz. That's the other thing. Some of the things. So Xenohunters is a hidden movement game, and so I think Jack and I had zero concept about how to make that work in the digital space, and Cassie figured it out. And it would have taken us weeks, of time, and we could instead spend that time on something more useful than trying to figure out one particular part of a digital implementation. Whereas for Cassie, now she's got that skill set she's taken out to other designers as well.
I can see designers who've got games that are a bit unusual being a bit hesitant of using a digital platform because they might think certain things are hard to implement. Certainly, I imagine things like any kind of dexterity game is probably off the table. But is there something that people have expressed is difficult or hard to do on digital that you found solutions for?
Usually what I like to do is if there's something I'm not confident about, is I'll go and just read about it and see. So I had somebody come to me for a rotating hot pot game, and that was definitely something I wasn't really sure how I would do. They ended up not coming back to me. I think they just decided to figure it out on their own. But usually, I like a challenge, and I won't generally charge for that time that I'll be fiddling around to work it out, because it's so interesting to me, and I'm like, ooh, what can I do here? Probably for a game that Tati and I did recently, last year we did a digital Kickstarter called Katzenspiel Roll for the Clouds. Something there was I started to learn a few little coding tricks and created my own counters so that the little cats were the counters. So it was really cute, really, really cute. But also just learning, because they had to pull little numbers out of a bag, because it was a roll and write game. And how do you do a roll and write game on tabletop, right? Yeah. So we made little bags with all the numbers, and then I coded each little thing that when you dropped it, after 10 seconds, it would lock into place so you couldn't move them around.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool little solution to come up with, how do you do a roll and write on digital platform, much like a dexterity game. I know Tabletop Simulator actually has a flick button.
Yep,
so
it does, yeah.
Yeah, but it's something to note.
What about Tabletop?
Sally, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say.
Engine with it?
Say it again?
We missed that.
Sorry, does Tabletopia have a physics engine?
Tabletop
Simulator?
or
No, Tabletopia.
does Tabletopia?
Tabletopia doesn't have a physics engine built in. It's built on Unity, so it's a very basic. It's very basic. Things will fall and displace when objects are put in the way. But it's not the same physics engine that a tabletop simulator has.
Do you think that on that subject, there's obviously sort of grades of how virtual these things are. One of the, I think, strengths of Tabletopia is it's very physical, which makes it very similar to a table. But obviously there are therefore things that you can't do. And then you go the other extreme, like Board Game Arena, where everything is really, really scripted. Do you think like clients are going to have different preferences, or is it more about is it the kind of game that suggests that which one or the other, or is it all about just how people prefer to interact? Anyone can come in on that. Mark, do you find like...
Yeah, I find there are different challenges to digital, which sort of determine where the best space is. I mean, like you said, with Board Game Arena, you've got the fully automated setup. And for me, if I'm just like tired, it's the end of the day, and I just want to play something and just click, 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 I'm going to play 3 hours of 6 NIP on Board Game Arena. So right. I totally get that automation can also just sort of speed up a game. It can take a lot of the mental load out. At the same time, if you want to sort of get that feeling of the game as it would be on a table, things like Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator can sort of give you that feeling and give you more of a sense of the spatial aspect of things. So, for example, we've got games like like the King's Dilemma demo on Tabletopia, and that really sort of gives you the feeling of sitting around a table with everyone and just debating, and then actually getting to see as the trackers move up and down. It really gives you this sense of like being surrounded by people and being in the space with people, which is more analogous to physical. Yep. And so I really like those aspects, which bring, a bit of that feeling back to you. But, Sally, I'm sure you've found that when you're implementing digitally, there are a lot of challenges where you can't just recreate the physical game one for one, right?
Yeah, so my game, Treasure Mania particularly, is actually a very physical game. It's a board game, but there are modular boards, which are like worlds that interlink. And one of the moves is you can pick them up, move them around, and drop it somewhere else to change the map. But it's got all these little treasure pieces on it. And like the real world, you pick up the thing and they fall off. And you're like, oh. So you had to set things like the lift height. And there's a little strong man setting in Tabletop Simulator, and you have to put it down to the lowest setting, so when you pick it up, it picks it up gently, not boom and everything. The physics will react and the pieces will fly off. Or sometimes things were falling off the edges and I couldn't work out why. And it seemed to have something to do with the dimensions of the treasures. So back to it being time-consuming, what Callan said before, yes, that is absolutely true. And I had time to learn during the pandemic, but if you don't, go to Cassie or someone like that and get her to do it. You probably had these problems before on other games. But yeah, Treasure Mania is a very physical game. And by the end of it, Cassie did it first and then I did another version. We were able to create something that felt very much like the real thing. And you're moving things around, you're rotating, there's a lot of physics in it, and it works really beautifully. And like she said, it looks really beautiful.
One thing you mentioned there is sort of the physical experience of being surrounded by people. Obviously, there are a lot of games where being able to watch people's faces, and especially social games and party games and bluffing games, is there we have a setup here where we can do that, but how much implementation is that in these platforms? Are we missing something by not seeing these faces as much?
Without
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sally, go first. Yep.
I'll just go briefly. I'm not sure about the bluffing section. Maybe someone else can take that. But when I was joining these conventions and working with people, you do feel this great intimacy of meeting someone new. You're there for the same reason. You feel this connection. But I think without seeing their faces like we all are seeing now, an element is missing. Obviously, the physical is missing, but if you don't have any camera, then there's another element missing. But when you're playing a game for an hour, you don't necessarily want to be looking back and forth. So what I would do is I would just, at the start of the game, make sure everyone has their cameras on. Some people are shy, that's fine. But then we're looking at each other, the face to the name type of thing. And then you jump into the game, you're looking at the board, not looking at the people. But you just got more of a sense of who they are and more of a sense of connection. And I found that really important.
Yeah, I think in my experience, a lot of the sort of development of that had actually come on the side of the communication platforms, so like Zoom or Discord or whatever you're using to talk to people. Like when we first started doing our Discord things, we were running Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, which is like a social negotiation game with no turn order. And it could be chaos, sometimes with people talking over each other and you're trying to convince people to take terrible cures. So a lot of the humour was sometimes lost. But then, I think when we were doing some games with reviewers and we were doing some more of our testing games, we set a requirement to have a webcam. And I see that a lot now. It's quite common to, like, if you're doing like a play test session, it's like, or you were doing like a recording session, it's like you must have a webcam so that you can get that feedback. And one thing that I noticed Tabletopia has, and I don't know if it's in Tabletop Simulator, but the turn order, which was really useful when we were doing a game that we made called Animal World War and Animal Empire, because we'd have people who didn't really know how the game worked, and they could have this visual turn order indicator that let them know how far away they were from a turn. They could jump into a different Discord chat and discuss with us the rules and then go back and do their turn without sort of having to talk over everybody else.
Sorry,
I was going to say that...
you can do that in Tabletop Simulator.
Funnily enough, Secret Hitler is our most played game on the platform.
Right.
So, for some reason, people are really attracted to playing it on the platform, coupled with a Discord server. So I actually see in our Discord server for Tabletopia that people are just starting games and games and games and have they're hopping into the video chat channels just like we're doing for this panel, and it gets a lot of popularity.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting to me that people are using these things for social games. What about in playtesting though? I know when I playtest, I like to really watch my players' expressions. Are you still, like you mentioned that this is you do this for recording games and stuff? Is that important, Sally? Are you feeling like that's harder to do when you're playtesting?
Probably not, because you're listening and you can pick up who's really getting into the game and who feels like they're falling behind. And maybe the person who's falling behind doesn't vocalize why, but they might at the end with the feedback, or you might want to talk to them later and say, oh, you weren't quite into this, what was missing for you, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, but I just found very quickly with a group of strangers, you get this really relaxed feeling. And for example, when I was doing Gen Con, which by the way was very different to Foreseeable Online and PAX Collab, where I was mostly testing with other designers. Gen Con, you pay a little bit more money, but they get for you just gamers,
yep.
And you have a time slot. Internationally, it was either 8 a.m. or 11 p.m. But anyway, I remember playing with this family, and it was a brother, a sister, their husband and wife, and their mum, who was 60-something. And they were all playing my game, and then this other stray person, woman, and she became part of the family too. And it just felt like this wonderful family experience, and the grandma won, by the way.
that's fantastic.
But yeah, people feel that they're making connections.
Yeah.
And often they want to stay in touch afterwards. And that's slightly the difficult thing, because if you're a designer and you want contacts, you have to kind of bravely ask for emails, connect with them on Facebook, and try to keep that connection going. I can't remember what the original question was.
Well, is it harder to play test when you're in person? Sorry, over digital than it is in person. Are you missing information?
You can totally sense when people are having fun.
Yeah.
They're laughing, they're joking, I'm going to get you. They're getting involved. And silence says a lot, right? So if the player's holding back, so even if you're not getting the physical body language, you'll get a feel for it.
Yeah.
Or at the end, they will tell you. So I don't really think, I probably got as much from a playtesting perspective virtually as I did in the real world, except sometimes if there are some imperfections of the program, not the program, but as I said before, Treasure Mania being a very physical game, or maybe one of the games where you need eye contact or something, if there's a limitation that way, that might transfer. But in terms of feedback, it's very similar to the real world.
Is there an issue, though, of obviously TTS, Tabletop Simulator, has the cost element. Have you found that just getting general players, people are reticent because they have to learn not only a card game or a board game, but also how to use the software? Has that been a barrier to getting players or play testers?
Yeah, it was really difficult for us to start off with, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sally, you had something to say?
No, not really. That's probably a more useful answer. Keep going.
No, when we started running our Discord games, it was about 50-50. How do I play this game? How do I use this software? And I think there was a lot of bugs early on in these softwares, both with Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia, and a lot of the analogs that have popped up since then. The bugs have been ironed out somewhat, but there is definitely a learning curve. I personally feel like there isn't any substitute for having people around a table physically playing your board game, because there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can learn in terms of how people, interact with the components of the game and what bits they look at, what bits they can physically see or not see. But I agree with Sally that there's not, in terms of seeing whether people are interested in having a good time and reading expressions, there's not a huge difference. You can always tell if someone's into it. If you can get it, I think, you can tell if they're into it, if you can get them through the process of learning how to use the platform.
So on that question, particularly, I'll throw this to Mark. Do you think, assuming we all get out of COVID, is this going to be the future? Are more and more people just going to be I do 50, 60, 70% of my board gaming on digital platforms now? Is that likely to happen? Oh, hang on, we've lost your sound, sorry.
Sorry about that, I muted myself. I think it's really interesting because I think digital is always going to sort of have a place, but I don't think it's ever going to take the place of physical board gaming. When we can all get back together, when we can all play games again, it's going to be wonderful. And it's also going to be, I think, the experience we prefer. That being said, we've found that a lot of people do love having the option of digital. I guess it's part of the toolkit of being a gamer, as it is part of the toolkit of being a designer, because it gives you the option to play with people when they're overseas or when you can't get access to them. So, for designers, it's actually really good to have a digital version so that you can play. You can make content and do live streams with content creators you can't get the physical game to because it might be cost prohibitive or for another reason. For players, it's also really good for testing out games. So we actually did a end-of-year survey last year, and 76% of our respondents said they use Tabletopia. One of the primary reasons they use Tabletopia is to try games before they decide to play them, to buy them. So I think there's always going to be a use case for having digital as an option.
Fantastic. I think also perhaps there's going to be some games that people just don't want to have to set up or go through. So legacy games, for example. I've recently been in a Twilight Imperium tournament, which I think would only be possible because we can play it on Tabletop Simulator. Because then you can save it. We can play for an hour, come back a week later, and it's all still there, and it's not taking up someone's table. So I think perhaps as with our small houses as well, that could be. So Cassie's got to duck out. I'm sure we must ask her what her cat's name is when she comes back, because I think they'll be in the comments. We've got about 10 minutes left, guys. Let's think about then further on the future. What do we think is going to happen in the next 5-10 years with digital implementation and design?
So I've got a little peek into that window actually, and without being too self-promoty, the team behind Tabletopia is actually currently working on a new platform that solves one of the big issues that was raised here, which is video chat with the game elements integrated into it. So it's kind of going to be like Discord or Zoom, but you can see dice rolls, you can see scores, you can see cards that people have or roles that people have been assigned purely in the video chat windows. So I think there's space for improving the usability UI of digital gaming, and I think that's going to be one of the things that helps bring it forward. There's also things like VR and AR, which are going to catapult games further, assuming those systems can actually get some momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good to know where Tabletopia is going, because it sounds like it's exactly in the direction where the pain points are. From my perspective, the interesting thing that I wanted to sort of see how other people felt about is monetization of games on these platforms. I know that Cassie in the past has talked about you release like a version of the game with maybe less components or less features on Tabletopia that's free to play, try to buy, and then the actual physical product has more of it. And one thing that we've talked about in the past in Half Monster is like, having premium games or maybe like, sneak peeks or something like that costs a little bit of money to get access to. So it'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Sally, or
who wants to jump in? Start
Sally
with
and Cassie.
Well, I have an example. So I also work with Grand Gamers Guild over in America. And so as one of my other early pandemic projects, I digitized their game Gorinto. So what we did there, because obviously they wanted a lot of their backers to be able to try the game during the campaign and have something to do while they were waiting, is we made a demo module of it that was free to play for everybody, and that had half of the goals, all of everything you needed to play a proper game of it to try it out, but half of the goals. And then we did a couple of other modules where we did the solo mode, the 6-player mode, and the dragon module, and actually put that on my little web store for sale. And I sold a few copies, like not a lot, but and we sold a few copies during the campaign too. So that was like quite cool, and it was a good example of like doing a demo and doing a paid product. And then obviously the Roll for the Clouds Kickstarter I did with Tatooine Sunrise Tornado was a paid mod that we did on Tabletop Simulator. Now I know Tabletopia has one where we can just upload games to the premium content, and I think that's a lot more straightforward than the TTS way of doing things, which is fiddly.
Yeah, we're not stopping support, but we're stopping making new DLCs for games. So on Tabletopia, if you don't know, we're a premium subscription service. So there's all our free catalog, and then if you are a subscriber, you get access to the premium games and premium setups. And we also have the option on Steam to purchase one-off DLCs. So you could buy Wingspan without having a premium subscription. Then you own it for life. We've actually found that not many people are interested in taking that up, which is sort of why we're slowing down on that. And I think the premium model sort of speaks to how people value the digital versions of games, where people kind of say, "Oh, it's just a mod. It's just a bunch of components thrown together. I'm not getting an actual thing of worth." But with the premium model, I think that sort of diffuses a bit of that feeling because you're getting access to suddenly 100 games, 300 games, 500 games.
Right.
Yeah, and like that's where I wouldn't bother making DLC, but with the premium, you just add it to that and you get a small portion of that every month in royalties or something. Yeah, oof. She is like such a Velcro cat. So that sort of would make more sense because, and I've seen it myself while browsing Tabletopia, where I go, oh, that looks nice, but I have so many games in person and no free time, so I never really get around to playing them. But I do see them, and I'm like, well, just save that, just in case I get around to doing that. So, and I imagine there's lots of other people who actually do follow through and get the premium version and then play those games and enjoy them. So
I imagine it's very similar to what the Xbox Game Pass does for video games, where you're paying a monthly fee to get access to a library of hundreds of games. Just because the value of digital is so fickle, I think people are more willing to pay a recurring subscription for lots of access that's constantly updated and is a service, as opposed to these one-off transactions.
On the sort of related issue, I noticed when COVID sort of first hit, there was a huge influx of games onto Tabletop Simulator. Then all of a sudden there were takedown issues and copyright issues. Is that something that you guys are worried about as companies or as the providers? Like, are companies afraid of having their games basically implemented so that they're getting less money by people implemented by people who aren't them, with like a lack of quality control, if nothing else? Is something you can control at Tabletopia? Like who makes the mods? Is it all official or?
Yeah, with Tabletopia, any game that we put onto the public side of the platform is vetted to make sure it's either made by the rights holder, on behalf of the rights holder, or with the rights holder's approval. So before any game gets published, either we're talking directly to Cosmos or Queen Games or Stonemaier Games, or someone has made a mod, they're really excited about it. This actually happened with the Stardew Valley board game. Someone in the back end who was a big fan on the Stardew Valley Discord server made the game in Tabletopia, and then they wanted to publish it, so they began the process of reaching out to the creators of Stardew Valley themselves, and once we got the okay with them, went through all the terms of use with them, they were happy to get that on the platform, but we never publish anything without the actual approval of the rights holders.
But with TTS, I know there's less control. Callan, is that something you guys have been worried about at all, or are people just making mods that aren't official?
Sorry, my kid's a bit sick, so it's just that needs a bit of attention.
That's right.
On that note, to be honest, our attitude in terms of worried about copyright issues or someone copying our games is like, if they want to go through the entire effort to program it and get it up there, then that's a lot of time and effort. And I think the value that they'll get out of that is not going to be as significant as the value we'll get out of having it up there. Once it's discovered, then we can go through the process of having it taken down, but it's not really a risk to mitigate up front, if that makes sense, because the opportunity cost of doing it, I think, isn't worth it unless you're making like a Wingspan. For us, we're not quite at that stage yet.
Cassie, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so on that too, like as a mod creator, like you don't make any money out of it, so like it really is just going to be promoting. And so like I've done most of my mods now are all ones where creators have come to me and asked me to do it and have paid me to do it. So obviously I think 95% of mine are above board. I did a couple at the start that weren't, and for all of those, what I did personally was I just linked back to where people could buy those games from, so that, and then, I've also tried reaching out to those creators to let them know I'd done it, and, if they wanted me to pull it down, I will. But yeah, so like, it's up there. It was a fun project to do. I've linked back for people to buy the physical games, and I haven't had any problems whatsoever.
Callan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I actually think going into the future, there's actually probably an area for uploading your game asset for mod makers to mod the game. I think that's something that probably hasn't been investigated because most tabletop game designers are quite strict with their IP, which is totally fair. But, I think it'd be interesting to consider like releasing a small amount of assets for mod makers to be able to create their own, especially single player versions of a game.
Yeah, we could see things like Gary's mod happening in tabletop in the future, things where people take a game and turn it into something else. All right, we're almost near the end of time, so I'm just going to throw back to that question about the future and throw to Sally. What do you think we will see in the next 5-10 years, and what are you optimistic about for designers and producers making games?
I think this is just an extra dimension. It obviously won't replace the real world, but it just means we can travel further, we can bring people into our homes, we can make more connections. So in Brisbane, we've been pretty lucky with COVID, and I'm having regular in-person game nights as always. But, if I want to go to America, it's not going to cost me a mega plane ticket, accommodation, I can still have those experiences. So to me, it was like this amazing, lucky thing that came out of the unluckiness of what we've all had to deal with. So, and I think even if everything settles down, it'll be here to stay. So when there's a real convention, there'll be this online adjunct as well, and best of both worlds.
Fantastic. That's probably a great note to end on, that we have this new world to explore. All right, thank you so much for our panelists. I'll now get you all to just quickly tell us where we can find you on the internet or play your games. Start with you, Sally.
So they're currently not published or released to the public, so you have to contact me if you want to play test. But on the socials, I'm at SallyScribe, mostly Instagram, a bit lazy on Twitter. But yeah, please get in touch because I absolutely love meeting people, and it'd be a pleasure to have people test my games.
Fantastic. Mark?
Yes, so I'm Mark. I'm from Tabletopia. You can find us at tabletopia.com. You can download the Tabletopia app on iOS or Android or on Steam, or just go to your web browser. We're on all the socials at Tabletopia, at Tabletopia Games.
Fantastic. Cassie?
Okay. My game is currently just in the art stages before I go on the production, but I'm hoping there'll be physical copies for people by Christmas. You can also play the prototype version on Tabletop Simulator, and I will have the proper version of that done as soon as I get my artwork done. And I'm very, very much on Facebook all the time. So you want to look up either Katzenspiel Solutions, which is German spelling for cat games, but probably the easiest search would be to look for Klepto Kittens, a Facebook group.
Fantastic. And what is the name of your little kitty?
This is Medea. She's my little Velcro cat, and then Urian's just sort of sat over here.
Fantastic.
And they're the stars of my game.
Yes. Oh, awesome. And they'll hopefully be the stars of PAX Aus. Callan, where can we find you and Half Monster?
You can find us at halfmonstergames.com. So half as in HALF, monster, all one word, games.com. You can also look up at Half Monster Game or search Trust Me I'm a Doctor or Xeno Hunters. You can find all of our games on Tabletopia. You can try them all out. And we also do regular game playtest days on Thursdays. So if you're interested, go over to our website and you can find all the information about that there.
Fantastic. And is that playtesting just in-house or other people's games?
Oh. So I think at the moment we do playtesting our games, but we also have a program called Ink and Gumption, where basically... So I think Cassie and Steve also have some games going through Ink and Gumption. Yep. So we help local designers, Australian designers, get their games out to the public. So we sort of help them through the processes of design and production and distribution, manufacturing, the whole deal. So we also playtest their games as well.
Fantastic.
If you're interested in Ink and Gumption, you're interested in making a game, if you've got a concept, go over to our website and get in touch with us because we'd be keen to chat.
Fantastic. And did you have anything else to add there, Cassie?
Yeah, just that I was going to say you'll eventually be able to get my game via the Half Monster Games website as well.
Fantastic.
Through the Ink and Gumption program.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a great program, and we're also using it to distribute our games, which you can find more about on tinstargames.com. We produce role-playing games and card games, and you can also get them through the Half Monster website. Thank you once again to all our panelists, and for joining us and offering great insights into this topic. And we hope our audience enjoy this and enjoy the rest of their PAX Aus 2021. And that's it. Wave goodbye, and we'll see you hopefully around the con.